Built it right, built it strong, built it fast, built it done, built it true, built it real, yeah, I built it.
What is up, everybody? I was laying in bed last night thinking about how I have not really explained for this Project Fundamentals series. I like that, Project Fundamentals. I talked about what the structure of a project is, those three building blocks, the needs, the resources, the solutions. And then I talked about last time about the 6 tasks that all projects have to do, right? The 6 work activities that we all have to do whenever you're doing project work. You just have to do it. Those are the things that we have to do: the scoping, provisioning, specifying, delivering, verification, and validation. Those are the 6 project work tasks that everyone has to do. Doesn't matter if you're doing school projects, doesn't matter, just any work. But really, what is this model that I'm developing for you? Really, what is it for? Like, what's the point of it? Because I think out there's a lot of project management frameworks. But when it comes to this model, it's more than a project management framework, right? It's actually a one-stop shop project management plus project development plus project leadership, and really in general, project work. Okay. That's what I want to talk about today, which is not being confused about the different roles and the different kinds of responsibilities that happen when we're doing project work. Because out there, there's a lot of talk. I see a lot of talk online in the project sphere around project management, but not a lot on project leadership. It's kind of interesting to me how little I see on project leadership, because really what's more important, someone who knows how to manage a project or someone who knows how to lead a project? And all these management frameworks, it's all around managing these work tasks over a life cycle, right? From the kickoff to planning to execution, maintenance, maybe retirement, I don't know. I don't remember all of them. Oh boy, there is a little tiny dog who is totally losing its mind right now, yelling at me. So project management is just one piece of the puzzle of all the kinds of different activities or the different roles, responsibilities that we have. And so, man, that dog really threw me for a loop. He was just freaking out, poor little guy. But I was thinking in laying in bed, I was thinking, really, a lot of these project management frameworks, what are they trying to do? They're just managing a process, a predefined process. They call it agile, they call it waterfall, whatever. You come up with a framework and you're saying, hey, I'm gonna manage, given this process, given this pipeline, I'm gonna manage a project following these steps. I don't know about you guys, but that doesn't feel very inspirational to me. And it doesn't feel very customizable. It doesn't feel very useful, maybe outside of certain contexts, certain business applications, certain domains, certain applications. And what I want to talk about instead is this idea of project leadership and you taking control of how your project unfolds, right? So you actually need to determine your processes. You need to determine how you're going to be an effective builder, how you're going to be an effective doer to do and see the work get done. Because if you think about yourself as a project manager, it almost takes you outside of the work. It almost puts you in a perspective or a mentality where you're just kind of overlording or just watching the work unfold, but you're not leading the work. You're not taking the charge. You're maybe just following a process. And if you've ever worked with a project manager, someone who doesn't know what you're working on, they don't really understand the needs of that specific thing. They just want to throw a process on you. They want to throw a predefined system of tools and frameworks on you and then manage you. Yeah, I'm not going to like that too much. And I don't think you probably do either. And from a project manager's perspective, they probably don't like it either. I think it's just kind of a rough situation. So instead, I want to talk about project leadership and working with people who are doing development, the project development, okay? So what is leadership? Leadership, leading the charge. And when you're a project lead, what's your job? Well, your job is to make sure that the need, right, getting back to those fundamental building blocks of the project structure, you're making sure that the need is well defined, the resources are well defined, right, the available resources, and the solution is well defined. And you're going to make sure that the tasks, those 6 fundamental tasks, scoping, provisioning, specification, delivery, verification, validation, are happening, okay? They're happening insofar as where you're at in the project development timeline. And it's your job as the leader to not only make sure that they're happening, that everything is well defined, but that you are enabling all of that work, right? And maybe you're the even one doing the work, right? So if this is a solo project, you're the lead, you're the developer, you're the manager, and you're the executor, right? You kind of are the one-stop shop. And you meet some people who, they hate working in teams, and they love, maybe they have their little duck carving hobby, and they love their projects. They love their duck carving projects. And they have it all in their head, right? They see the vision of what they're making in their head. They love just getting down into the basement, get their tools out, get that piece of wood or paint or whatever they're doing and making that project happen. But if you've ever worked in a team environment, you can't have it all in your head, right? You can't just keep it all up top. You gotta create communication processes and communication pathways and protocols and processes. And for some people who aren't really team kind of people, which I'm not blaming anyone, right? I think working with teams is hard work. It's a lot, but it has to be done sometimes because whatever that project you've chosen to undertake, it's more than what one person can handle. And so because of that, you have to bring in people. And that means you as a project lead all of a sudden have to manage, lead, direct, set up, establish processes, and be that person that's enabling everything to happen. And so project leadership is a skill. It is a skill that you have to develop. And you start off by developing it for yourself, in yourself, right? Working on solo projects. You start small, right? It's like you're training a muscle. And in order to train that muscle, you got to start somewhere, right? I'm not going to sit you down and, or I guess take you out and make you run a marathon day 1, right? It's just not going to happen. You're going to kill yourself, right? You work up to it. Maybe you start a 5K, and then you do a 10K, and then you do a half marathon, and then eventually you work your way up. And in the same way, you got to start somewhere when it comes to doing projects. And what's a good way is to lead yourself, right? Before you're ready to lead others, you got to lead yourself. And so leading yourself into a project of saying, hey, I want to build a website. I want to build a personal website for my portfolio. And then lead yourself. Say, okay, if I am the lead on this team of me, myself, and I'm going to walk through the structure of a project. I need a way to get my name out there, to show my portfolio, and I've decided that the solution I'm going to pursue is a website. It's a personal website. Okay, great. Well, what are my resources? What do I have at my disposal? A computer, a bank account, hopefully with some dollars in it, some skill and some time, right? And then gathering all your materials that you want to upload and that whole thing. And so all of a sudden now you've created the need, the resources, the solution, and then you are on the hook for each of those 6 tasks, right? Have I scoped? How well have I scoped this? What is in scope and out of scope for this website that I want to develop, given my budget constraints, given my time constraints? What resources do I need to provide, right? What do I need to purchase? I need to purchase a domain. I need to purchase maybe some mail services, who knows, whatever software tools you might need. Specifically, right, specs. What exactly do I want on each page? What's the nav? What's the architecture of this website? What pages do I want to have exist? Delivery. All right, I'm gonna actually sit down and execute and do the spec. Verification. All right, now I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna double check everything's on the page, everything's working right, all the links are working, everything's cross-linked, I've registered everything correctly, maybe with Google search, indexing, just the whole thing, and then validation. Did it actually meet the need? Did it actually get my name out there? Am I actually solving the problem that I initially wanted to solve, which was, hey, you know what? I really need to get my portfolio some public exposure. Is that working? So solo projects are a great way for you to exercise your ability to manage and lead a team, okay? Because the more you get reps, right? It's all about getting, that workout analogy, again, it's about getting practice. It's about getting your reps in when it comes to exercising your project leadership muscle and getting good at saying very quickly what the needs are, the resources are, solution, the 6 tasks, go, get it done. So, for me, an example of this, last year, we had just moved from, not last year, I guess it would have been the end of 23. We had moved from Ithaca, New York, because I was finishing my PhD at Cornell, and we had moved back home to Idaho, where my wife is originally from. And because of that, we had gotten rid, so heartbreaking, of a lot of our exercise equipment. And I was kind of sad because where we had moved to, middle of nowhere, there was one gym, and there still is only one gym open in town, and it actually shares a floor plan or shares a building with a juice bar, like one of those like Jamba Juices. It's not a Jamba Juice, but it's like a similar kind of thing. And so the whole time you go in there and you work out, people are just hanging out in a juice bar just watching you. And it's just kind of like a weird vibe. Anyway, so I didn't want to be a part of that gym. And I didn't have any equipment. And so I was in my garage one day. And I grew up in Florida and grew up longboarding. And so I always haul these couple like sentimental longboards with me wherever I go. And I was in the garage, and I just grabbed one, and I was like, I could probably do some ab exercises with this longboard. And so, like an ab rollout kind of a situation. And I did, and I was like, yeah, I wonder if I could do like a plank. And well, I wonder, and so I started getting a little creative. And I grabbed 2 longboards, and I was like, oh, I wonder if I could kind of do like a mountain climber thing where you put your feet on them and you go back and forth and on your hands. And so I had these ideas around these longboards. And if you think about it, I had a need. I need to, just get a little workout in, get a little exercise. And I looked in my garage, and I didn't like the resources that were in town. And I looked at my garage, and I was like, I have these resources, and came up with a solution on the fly. And sure enough, it worked out, right? It actually validated my need that, this solution works. And so then I had this idea. I was like, I wonder if I could use this idea of using longboards, because I noticed that the rolling nature of those big polyurethane wheels and the nice gliding bearings, those kind of ABEC 11 bearings, were super nice from a user experience perspective for rolling out, way better than the kind of crappy ab wheel clunkiness. And so I was like, I wonder if I could custom build kind of these rolling longboards. And so I bought a couple longboards and cut them out really short, like 18 inches, I think is what they were, and made a drop through trucks and customized or custom built these kind of rolling short longboards. I end up calling them roller plates. And I went through a couple different iterations of playing around building this custom exercise equipment, and eventually started tying resistance bands and attaching one plate, one of the roller skateboards, attaching a resistance band to one end and then the other end to a wall, and using that as like an anchor so I can start getting some resistance. And so I came up with a whole exercise system iteratively as a solo project. And I tell that story to talk about how these solo projects, they teach us a lot. They teach us a lot about letting your needs, just organic needs. Hey, I need to exercise. I need to do something. Whatever your need is. And then you using your resources, coming up with interesting creative solutions, and then iterating and saying, okay, like now I can rescope and really think, what else about my needs can I address using this solution? Or what resources can I provide? I'm gonna go on Amazon and I'm gonna go buy some materials, and then I'm gonna spec it out and like build it and assemble it, and then I'm gonna make sure I did it right and see if it solved the problem. Like doing projects for yourself teaches you a lot about project leadership. And in terms of being able to go through the cycle, go through the project work. But in a team context, right? So I did that by myself. But in a team context, things change a lot. All of a sudden, it's more than just can you execute the structure of a project and the tasks of a project. It's can you enable other people to do that work? Do you have the soft skills required and the organizational and administrative skill required to lead people to do that work with you, right? And I think that is where people get hung up. But you know, it's one of those things, you got to crawl before you walk, before you run, before you fly. And so I think it's really good to get your hard skills of doing project work first, and then start learning how to work with other people, right? On how to lead as a project leader, lead these efforts, okay? Because what you need is to be able to then focus on the soft skills. How do you go about sitting down with someone and say, hey, we need to scope out this project? There's a couple different elements there, and I should probably get into it. But one, you know, let's say you're working with someone on a very particular project. How do you go about scoping out what needs you guys want to address? How do you go about finding out what resources they need to be successful? How do you go about figuring out the specification of what the deliverable needs to look like with that solution, right? What are your processes for doing that? Now, some of you, maybe you work in big corporate America and McKinsey, or maybe Boston Consulting Group, or some other consultation firm has come in and established processes for you. And if that's true, I'm sorry. And if that's you establishing these processes, I'm even more sorry. Because at the end of the day, one size does not fit all. And a good project leader is someone who knows how to tailor processes for a specific project. And when it comes to managing teams, right? And so if you have these large kind of consulting firm processes, they try to build it in such a way that everything has to flow through it, and it's really clunky, and it tends to gridlock stuff and cause a lot of red tape and frustrations, and then people feel defeated because they're not able to make progress, and then they blame the system, and then your projects go nowhere, and no one's held accountable because some random consulting firm set it up and they're not even here anymore, and it's just a disaster. So for me, what I like is say, you're the project lead. Here are the projects that I'm putting you in charge of. Here are the teams that you oversee. Get it done. These are the outputs I expect. Go. and then hold people accountable, right? And let them build the processes that they need to build with their team to enable success. But that takes a lot of that requires a lot of trust. So back to, let's say you're working with a particular person or a small group of 2 or 3 people on a team, and you're the project lead. Right now, not only do you have to think about all the tasks that you got to do, those 6 fundamental tasks of a project, not only are you thinking about the needs that you have, the resources, the solution, you also got to think about personalities, right? That's the hard part. That is the hard part for a lot of people, and myself included. Personalities, right? How to manage the interpersonal side of projects. Because working with people, well, you never know what you're going to get sometimes. And I don't really have a lot to say around that other than that's a skill you got to master. It's just part of being a good project lead, which is learning those soft skills. Get some emotional intelligence going on. Read a book. Ask your partner for how to be a better communicator, right? The world is ready to teach you if you're ready to learn and listen. And just having that humility, right? But what's beautiful about the framework I've been talking about, which is, those 3 building blocks and 6 tasks, is it gives you a mental model for how to walk people through a project, how to lead a team through a project, and to very explicitly know where you're at. Hey guys, for example, with my teams, I sit down and say, hey, let's scope out this quarter all the projects we got going on. Let's scope them all out, okay? We're gonna identify all the needs we're trying to address, and we're gonna scope out a list of projects. Great, done. And then great, now with my teams, now that we've scoped them all out, what are all the resources you guys need? Great. Now we zoom into each project. Specifically, what exactly are we building? Project by project by project by project, spec it out. Great, who's on the hook for delivering what? You assign roles, people responsibilities for deliverables, and a timeline. You hold them to it, and then you assign verification, who's in charge of ensuring everything was done correctly, and then who's in charge of validating that it solved the problem. And then you just rinse and repeat. It's not that hard. It really isn't that hard from the operations logistics side. What's hard is when John Doe, when Mrs. Jane Doe call in and say, oh, just found out I'm pregnant, I'm gonna be gone this month, or, oh, my car broke down, or, oh, I'm sick and calling in, or your boss calls you up and says, hey, I need you guys to get off that project because we decided to reallocate those resources that we promised you to someone else. Or, hey, actually, you know what? I need you that week that you had planned that sprint. I actually need you to fly out to Texas or something. That is when things get messy, is the uncertainty involved with projects, the uncertainty involved with people's personal lives, changing economic environments, unexpected resource redistributions. But that's where leadership really comes into play, right? That's where your understanding as a leader, as a project leader, can come in and help people navigate through that uncertainty, through that trial, through that obstacle. And so you can be able to say, hey, you know what, team? We just had a resource redistribution. And now we're gonna have to rethink the deliverable. We're gonna have to rescope what needs we're able to address because we have half the resources we did last week now. Or the timeline got shifted. Now we have to deliver next week, so we need to rescope and we need to scope down what this is actually trying to accomplish. Or maybe it's the other way. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe your boss calls up and says, hey, you guys have been crushing it. You've been doing such a good job on that project. I want to expand your budget and give you more of a team, more of a bigger team. Or actually, hey, can you bring on this other team? They've been working closely with you and I decided that that's gonna happen. Or maybe your boss calls you up and says, hey, you know what, we just acquired another company and I want you to oversee their 3 teams. Oh boy, oh boy. This stuff happens, right? It happens all the stinking time. And what are you gonna be able to do as a project leader in terms of being able to stay on your game, in terms of being able to look at your projects that you're responsible for, understanding your capacity, accumulating the resources you're gonna need to be successful, to lead the people, and then as project resources change, navigate through those 6 tasks, right? Because no one cares. Here's some big brother hard truth. No one cares about how hard it is to close out a project. No one cares. I don't care. Your mom doesn't care. Like, no one cares, right? People are gonna be like, oh, that's hard. I'm sorry you had a stressful day at work, blah, 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 blah. You know what people care about? Outcomes. People care about outcomes. What did you actually get done? And honestly, all projects are hard to finish. Every single one. I don't care if you're a solo project doer, you're working in a small team, a large team, a gigantic enterprise. All projects, every single one takes work. Oh my gosh. It takes a lot of work and it's hard and there's adversity and the environment changes and your teams change and all your plans that you had planned so perfectly for 6 months all of a sudden get thrown out the window, right? Your job as a leader, as a project leader, is to navigate through that adversity and come out the other side with a good outcome. That's what separates the good from the great. That's what separates the winners from the losers. And if you want to be a winner, sound like Donald Trump here, if you want to be a winner, you're going to have to figure out how to lead teams through adversity. You're going to have to figure out how to lead teams through times when resources change, for good or for bad. You know, there's that whole thing about the curse. There's a curse of overabundance. It can be just as bad as having underabundance, right? You look at the government and how much waste there is in government, right? All this fraud stuff and just horrible amounts of waste. People just using up budget on nothing, on boots or something, just to spend budget dollars, just so they can maintain their budget next week, or next year, I mean. The amount of waste that happens because there's essentially a blank check, a bottomless pit of dollars. And guess what? Did that actually make projects happen, get finished more successfully? No. Have you ever used a government service, a government website? They're awful, awful. So stop thinking as a project lead, you're under-resourced. And that is, if you just had all the resources you need, then you would be able to be successful. It's not true. Look at the most heavily resourced companies. They often stagnate. They often get stale, right? You don't want to be over-resourced. Now, I'm not saying you want to be starving either. You don't, if you can't even pay the bills, if you can't keep the lights on, that's not going to work either. So don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is there's a sweet spot. There is a sweet spot of stimulation where you aren't dying, literally, and you're not, so gluttonous with resources that you're lazy, right? There's a sweet spot where you're hungry and you're motivated and you're ready to get it done. That's what you're looking for as a lead. You're looking for, how do I keep my team just stressed enough, just pushing hard enough? How do I keep myself just worried enough, just stressed enough, just focused enough where I'm working through hard stuff, where I'm pushing through, where I'm making progress, where there's just enough adversity, where I'm not crushed, but I'm also not unmotivated, right? I'm actually motivated to overcome. We need that stimulation. So there's multiple layers. There's that solo project phase. There's that small team working on an individual project phase. And then there's that portfolio level, right? Where you now have a portfolio of projects and you're working on with teams who are each working on their individual projects. And then there's another level above that, which is you're now managing portfolio managers. right? And that's typically like a vice president, president role, director level role, something like that, where you now have teams of teams, right? And it kind of just goes on from there. At that point, it doesn't really matter anymore. The distinction stops making a difference if you keep going up in the hierarchy. And that's just because of the nature of it, right? If you go up another level, it's still just a team of teams. So it doesn't really matter anymore. But what I'm trying to say is that as you learn to navigate solo projects, and then you learn the interpersonal skills to navigate individual small team projects, and then you learn the administrative skills to now manage multiple projects, and then as long with the interpersonal level at that scale too, all of a sudden you're looking pretty good. You're doing pretty excellent. You're crushing life, I think. I think you're going to be a hot commodity in the job market if you can come in and you can say, hey, you know what? I worked for this company for 5 years. Here are all the projects I led, right? Think about it. Here are all the projects I led. Here's everything I accomplished, everything we did, right? Every output we did. And here's all the adversity. Here's everything we had to overcome in order to finish that project. And you talk about that in an interview? I mean, I don't even know why you're interviewing at that point. You need to be off building your own company, right? You're ready. You're ready to rock. You don't need to be working at a corporate company anymore. You need to be building your own thing. You're too skilled. You're too skilled at that point to just be stuck in a mid-level management job. You're ready to build your own life. And so, anyway, I just wanted to share those thoughts for you today. I think this is a great series. Hopefully it's going well for you. Hopefully you're learning a lot. And until next time.